He said, every night when you go to bed and you put your head on that pillow, I want you to ask yourself this one question. Did I do anything today for my own personal benefit that was at the expense of another individual, group of individuals, or organization? And you need to answer it with a yes or a no. If you answer it with a no, you can sleep peacefully because you've done the right thing.
Welcome to Conversations That Grow, where we explore how meaningful conversations can help you expand your influence, build authority, and grow your business in unexpected ways. Today, I'm joined by Jim Carlough, Chief Sales Officer at Impulse, seasoned business strategist, leadership speaker, and author of The 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership. With over 30 years of experience transforming teams and driving growth, Jim brings a rare mix of integrity, vision, and real-world wisdom. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk with you and your audience this morning.
Thank you so much. And Jim, you know what makes your story especially powerful, and honestly, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on, is that it all goes back to one pivotal conversation, a conversation that reshaped the way you lead, the choices you make, and the legacy that you're building. So if you don't mind, I'd love to go there. Can you tell us what happened in that conversation with Donnie Tate and why it stuck with you all these years?
Yes, and I'll put it into context.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to tell your audience just how old I really am. But when I graduated college in 1983, trying to make myself younger. In 1983, I also ran for local city government for a position of a city councilman in a small town in New Jersey. And I won. And shortly after the election, the city administrator asked for me to come in and talk to him. And this was before email and internet and all this other stuff. And so I had no idea what he wanted to talk about. So I got there and we sat down and we started chatting. And he told me he was impressed with the fact that I was able to win. I earned it and I was going to be successful and all the nice things that you would expect somebody to say. And then he paused for a moment. He said, but I do want to ask you for one favor. And now here I am, brand new into politics, and the first thing I hear is somebody wants me to do them a favor. That usually means my antennae go up, but that wasn't his intent. And I said, well, what can I do for you? And he said, well, this is more for you, but it's not necessarily for me, but I'm going to ask you to do one thing. He said, every night when you go to bed and you put your head on that pillow, I want you to reflect on the day and I want you to ask yourself this one question. Did I do anything today for my own personal benefit that was at the expense of another individual, group of individuals, or organization? And you need to answer it with a yes or a no. If you answer it with a no, you can sleep peacefully because you've done the right thing. But if you answer yes, you need to stop and reflect and figure out how not to repeat that. Wow. And either how to fix what you did or unwind it. And that has stuck with me ever since November of 1984. And I have asked myself that question every single night. And I don't think I've ever answered that question with a yes.
Wow, that is just absolutely incredible. That's incredible.
And I'm assuming that's the story you're referring to.
Yes, that is the one. Yeah, because we had our pre-call, didn't we? And you mentioned it just in passing. We didn't get into the details, but you mentioned that there was a conversation that you had.
It was that powerful that it made me. It was sort of like getting hit on the side of the head with a 2x4 piece of wood, and not like. He wasn't suggesting at all that I lacked integrity, but it was really the importance of integrity. And it resonated with me because I was really raised that way to begin with from my parents. But hearing it from another person of authority was just unbelievable. And it also made me much more aware when I found myself in situations with people who lacked integrity. And it was very quick for me to pick up on that. And unfortunately, there's a fair number of people in the world who lack integrity. And we see it sometimes in the media every day. But the reality is, it is the one pillar that I say is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
If you work with me, you're going to have integrity, or you probably won't survive in that role. And I just demand it. But what's interesting is there's other leaders who exemplify all of the characteristics that I talk about in the book. And so, for example, integrity, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, when he joined Microsoft as CEO in 2014, he made it very clear to everyone that they were going to operate with absolute integrity. And he has followed through on that throughout the entire organization of Microsoft. And they're a far better company than they were pre his arrival.
Wow. Jim, thanks for sharing that. And if you don't mind, I just want to go back a little bit. So when Donnie first said those words to you, what did you feel? What went through your head? I'd love to know.
I couldn't get over the fact that he wasn't asking for a political favor. But he was not that type of man. He really wasn't. And he was one of those that I don't think a lot of people knew him, but he was actually a great administrator, and he absolutely operated with integrity. But I think most people thought he was unapproachable. And so they pictured him as being this, stoic older gentleman who just wouldn't budge on something, but he wouldn't budge on his principles is what it was. Yeah. And it was very quick for me to realize that. And it became very powerful. And I remembered, unfortunately, when he passed away, getting a call from a newspaper reporter. I had since moved on and moved to Texas, where I was raising a family. And this reporter who knew I knew him from when I served and didn't know this story called me, and she asked me, what is the one thing you remember about Don? And I told this story.
Yeah.
And she absolutely was just blown away by that story. And it has served me well throughout my professional career. And it has never failed me.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to dig into that. But another question before we get there. Why do you think he asked you that?
In that discussion, he said, this is a difficult job. You don't make a lot of money being a city councilman. I think at the time we got $5,000 a year. And it'll cost you more to be a city councilman because everybody wants you to come to their fundraising event than what you're going to get paid. So you're not doing it for the money. But I think his motivation was for me to know going in that there will be times where I will have to interact with people who lack integrity. And boy, was he correct. I was once approached by a developer who wanted to get a subdivision approved that would have built condos on the side of a mountain that surrounded the town on one side, and I wasn't in favor of it. And the individual came to me and he said, I'd like this unit over here to be yours. And I said, well, I don't have plans to live in that community, and he said, it'll be yours for a very cheap price. And I was very uncomfortable, and I said, does your daughter know you're here and what you're doing? Because she went to school with me. And he said, no, she doesn't. I said, well, then I think this conversation's over. Because I'm not in favor of the subdivision. I will not vote in favor of it because it was coming to the city council to approve it because it was denied by the planning board. And so the city council would be the deciding factor. And usually they rotate who votes first, second, or third. And I don't remember if I was first or second person to vote. But once I voted no, other no's followed. But one comment he had made to me was that all of the other council people were in favor of the subdivision, which I knew was not true. But it certainly did. It raised its ugly head a few times, and I stayed the course with that integrity, going down the center of the roadway and not wavering.
Wow, that's I love what you're saying, and Donnie sounds like a really wise man. And also, I think for you to be able to accept what he was saying and really understand the depth of it, shows that you were a man of principle too, that you were able to understand the weight of what he was saying. And listening to you speak, I think integrity became your non-negotiable and your personal compass.
Correct. There was only one. If I had a compass, it has one direction. I don't have 4 points. I have one direction.
How do you keep that pillar? I know you refer to these as pillars in your book. How do you keep that pillar of integrity strong in a fast-paced or high-pressure environment?
You know what? I've been doing it so long; it's almost natural. But it's helping others to see that in the way I behave and how I manage, which I think is more enlightening to see people buy into that and accept it. And I strongly believe that if you don't have integrity, you're not going to build a following with your team because everything else from there falls apart.
Yeah.
If I don't have integrity and I try to show compassion to you, you probably aren't going to believe that it's real. And the same thing if I try to show empathy, or if I'm trying to get us to get to a higher level of productivity or to help resolve a problem or a conflict. It's knowing that my behavior is going to be consistent each and every time. And I think that's probably why there's been a number of people throughout my career who have reached out and said, hey, before I put my resume out there, do you have an opening? Because I would love to work with you again. And that's one of the best compliments I think a leader can ever receive from someone, is the fact that they would want to work for you.
That's great. Jim, you say without integrity, there's no trust. Without trust, people won't follow. In your experience, then, what does it take to build that culture of trust?
It takes transparency, it takes honesty, and it takes the unwavering, fact that you have to, people can't see you as someone, I don't have all the answers. And so many times I am not the smartest person in the room. But I surround myself with very smart people, and we work collaboratively to get to the decisions that we need to make. And I think that resonates more with people because I include them versus exclude them in that process. And I think that's what builds the high-performing team, is that they're then vested in it. When I first entered management in 1983, it was very authoritarian. Almost everything, even in corporate America, was like a factory. You're going to do, you're telling people you're going to do these 3 things today, or tomorrow I expect you to do these 2 things. I'm now saying it more than I used to, but I realized a long time ago that those first people I managed in 1983, I probably need to reach out to and apologize because the world was different then. And I didn't know empathy. I didn't know compassion. I knew integrity. But it was so much more that a leader has to learn and develop, which is really what preempted and came out of all of the mentoring I was doing once I got on the tech side of healthcare. And what I was learning from people I was mentoring was they didn't understand these soft skills. And many times employers took an individual contributor who was doing a great job for the company and said, hey, I'm going to make you a manager. But gave them no roadmap and no program to be able to learn and understand what that meant in terms of other than just getting your goals accomplished, but being responsible for other human beings. It's a big aspiration for people to get into leadership. And it's a 24/7 job.
Yeah.
It's not, somebody once asked me, when does leadership begin? I assume it begins when you sit down at your desk. And I stopped for a second. I said, no, it starts when your feet hit the floor in the morning. Everything you do from the moment your feet hit the floor is a reflection of you. And so that integrity has to show in your home life, in your professional life, in your social life. And it's not something that I think people can turn off or should turn off.
Yeah.
Because I think you run the risk of losing a follower when they see that divergence from such a staunch position.
Wow, it's really powerful. And as you're saying that you run the risk of losing that follower. That's not just in the workplace. That can also be at home, right? Because you do it from the moment you hit your floor.
And I think if you were to ask people who have worked with me, or even ask my kids who are all grown, they're all successful, and you were to say to them, what's the one thing that you recall growing up? And I think you would get to the integrity component of the way they were raised. And they all three of them show that today in their own professional lives. And all three are very, very successful. Now, the good news is I didn't raise them. My wife did all of the hard work. I'm just taking the credit for it. But the reality is, it was a partnership and a team effort. But the reality is I was off doing my management thing, which required me to travel. And I was very proud of the fact that I never missed a birthday party. And I was reminded a couple of years ago that wasn't true. And I said, no, that was true. And my wife came to my defense. And it was my middle child, who's a boy, and he said, Dad missed my 13th birthday. And I said, no, I didn't, Andrew. This is what we did for your birthday. He said, I'm not talking the party. You are not home on my 13th birthday. And he was a grown adult at that person, but he had carried that with him because that was his recollection. I let him down on September 9th of whatever year it was that it turned 13. I think it would have been 2003. But I never realized he carried that. And so I apologized, but I did attend his birthday party.
Oh, thanks, Jim, for sharing. I have a few questions around what you've said. One is you talked about leadership being about transparency, honesty, collaborative with your team. I am curious, how would you say that a lack of leadership, what kind of detrimental effect would it have on a team if all those parts
I truly think it has a significant impact on an employee's psyche, number one, and how they feel about the organization and the team and the leader they work with. And to me, once you lose that, you can't ever regain that. If you lose somebody's trust, regaining that is virtually impossible, in my view. Because to me, even if I lost faith in someone, I'm always going to remember why I lost faith in them. And so if they were to come back into my life, my guard would be up from day one, or I would be questioning whether or not they've changed. Now, I'm a big proponent of we all change. Leadership changes. We all have to evolve with it. But I mean change in a negative way, in a positive way, different than they were when we first interacted.
And for someone who's been on the receiving end of that, so where they have lost trust and things have gone on, as a leader who sees that, okay, this has happened, how do they help rebuild that trust?
Well, sometimes they can't because it doesn't have to. It doesn't begin with them. And I'll give you an example. I've only told this story one other time.
Okay.
I worked for a CEO at one point, and at my one-on-one meeting, which was every Friday at noon, lunchtime, was done in his office, not with lunch. And he did it with the Wall Street Journal up in front of him, reading the Wall Street Journal, while I sat across from his desk looking at the front and back page of the main section, trying to update him on the activities of what my team was doing. And he would engage periodically, but to me, he put this wall and barrier up. I lost faith and trust in him. I didn't believe he was even listening. He could have even been asleep. But I can't understand how someone wouldn't give somebody their complete attention when they're sitting directly with them for a meeting that they're supposed to be having and be half engaged.
Wow.
And I never wanted to be that person. But and it didn't take me long to realize that behavior was not going to change. Ultimately, I left, and ultimately he failed. Unfortunately. But I think you can see the beginning of why he probably did, because if he was reading the newspaper with me, what was he doing with other leaders?
Yeah, that's a sobering account that you share. And I think, unfortunately, there are still many out there that are of the same kind.
I believe you're correct with that. I would like to think it's getting better or it's different, but today the world there's too much interference going around, and well, not interference, noise around us between social media, newsprint, television, everything that's going on in the world, and we're bombarded with all of this information, and we think that we have to read or get through. I actually stopped watching the news during COVID and have not gone back to it because I couldn't believe, I wasn't believing the stories we were being told.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't believe that or couldn't understand, in fact, I'll tell you where that comes from. I took a class in college that was called Contemporary Moral Values.
Okay.
I went to a Catholic university. It was taught by a priest, and there was no textbook. Now, this is pre-1983. That's the year I graduated. And you had to bring to class the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, or the Washington Post, one of those three newspapers. And if called upon, you had to be prepared to present the article, the writer's religious and political background,
Okay.
and what they were trying to convince you to believe. And it really changed my life in the way I interpreted media messaging and really had to now think about it. Pre-1983, there's no chat GPT. There's no internet. There's nothing that's going to be able to say, go look up Jim Carlough and his behaviors or political background, which is available today. So we were forced to really try to interpret through their words all of the things they were trying to get us to convince us to believe. And when COVID hit, I found that there was so much dissension between what the messaging was that I couldn't believe any of it. So I just shut it off.
That's really powerful. I think you're right. Like having to teach yourself and how to engage with media is so important, especially in a time as that we are living in now.
I totally agree. I hope for the better.
Yeah.
But in our own country here, things I'm concerned about is the debt level that we've gotten ourselves into. We're not talking about balanced budgets. We're still talking about increased spending. Our children's children are not going to be able to afford to live, and it worries me that we're not focused. The government doesn't care about the balance in their checkbook, but we have to care about the balance in our checkbooks.
Yeah.
And nobody's giving us free handouts of money just because we've exhausted everything. At the end of the week, if we can't buy groceries or feed our family, there's not somebody out there coming down and saying, oh, well, here's just some more money, like the government is doing, writing checks all the time. To me, that's one of the things I worry about the most.
That's fair. Jim, one of the things you talk about in your book, another pillar, is vision, and about vision being more than just goals. It's about alignment. So how do you make sure your team doesn't just hear it, but owns it?
With two things,
Okay.
focus and stability. to me, unwavering focus on what we're doing and working to achieve needs to also have that unwavering component. I'll give you an example. Jeff Bezos started Amazon as a online book retailer back in the early to mid 90s. He had a lot of very lean and difficult years, but he had a vision of being able to bring the storefront from the shopping mall into your house and where you could get those goods and services overnight. That was his singular focus. He got there because he never wavered from that focus, and he continued to stay there. Now, they had some tough years, and I actually tell a story. There's a story I included in the book about when he, in his early years, when he didn't have offices in every major city and massive warehouses, he had a customer service problem. And he knew that if he didn't fix the customer service problem and that it needed his attention, that Amazon would fail. So he took a desk and put it in the middle of the customer service department, and he sat there so he could watch and visualize exactly the behaviors that were going on every day so that he could be involved with fixing the problem so it didn't destroy his company. That's focus.
And commitment to his end goal.
Correct. And the stability to be able to continue to operate the same way with the same principles of our service has to be impeccable or somebody's going to get in the car and drive 5 miles to the mall to buy what they want.
Yeah.
And he's right. And he's right.
Wow. I did not know that about him. That's very cool. Jim, when building or turning around a business, how do you hold people accountable without micromanaging? So as a leader, how would you do that?
So the first thing I think that people do incorrectly when they take on a new responsibility is they walk into it, and before they really understand what's going on, they start making change for change's sake. And I believe the first thing a leader needs to do is just sit back and listen and make no decisions for 30 or 45 days and understand truly the challenges that the group or organization is having. If you can't listen to the people to understand where the challenges are, how do you know what works and what doesn't work? And so I think in order to turn anything around, you have to be very sensitive to not throwing, as they say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Really understand what's in that water so you're keeping what's good and solid and building upon that. And that's the approach that I follow. Not everything is that horrible that it all has to be gutted and replaced. You may have to replace some systems if there's new technology available, change organizational structure, change how people are measured and are held accountable. I very much believe in not just goals, but key performance indicators, so KPIs. So for my organization, there are KPIs that we measure on a frequent basis that helps tell us if we did those 20 things, we know that the money will be there or the sales will happen or whatever will occur. If we see a break in the way those indicators are showing a downward trend, we have to reverse that to counteract the negative change it would have. Right now in my current role, we've been rebuilding kind of the sales process structure and making it much more proactive. But as a result of that, we also have to build a sustainable pipeline of revenue. And we're in the midst of doing that, where we had a couple of quarters in 2024 where the sales numbers didn't hit the mark. And so this process that we put in place for outbound activity and to generate interest in the market is starting to now impact the pipeline. We'll still have some blips in the road moving forward, but I think we're on the pathway to fix what was a problem prior to the acquisition that I was part of.
Yeah. you'd mentioned that it's better to give it time before you start making changes, understand what the challenges are. From your experience, what's harder to fix as far as challenges go, like the hard data or the soft performance? I'm not really sure how to word this actually. Is it the hard data or is it the people that are maybe misaligned or lacking the vision of what the company's doing? I'm not really sure how to say this. I'm sorry. Maybe you can understand and put into words better what I'm trying to say.
I love the question. And this will certainly show we have not rehearsed anything. but let me tell you a situation that I was thrown into. I went to work for a company in the healthcare space in the mid to late 90s. It was privately owned by a husband and wife team. The husband ran the sales and marketing and account management organization, and they were losing customers. Their retention rate was about 60% year over year. Their sales had bottomed out, and I was asked to come in and clean house. When I got in after observing everything, I did restructure our account management and customer service area. To me, I said, we have to stop the bleeding or we don't grow. And so focus number one was changing that. So we changed that 60% to 90 in about 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And we made some significant change, but we saw our pathway so that by the end of the first year, we would have a retention rate of 90%. When I turned to the sales organization, the owner of the company was convinced that they all had to go. I only let one person go. The rest of them I kept, and the rest of them I refocused and energized them. They had just gotten bored, and they lacked leadership, and they lacked having fun. It wasn't rocket science. And the owner kept saying, when are you going to get rid of it? When are you going to get rid of it? And I was like, we don't need to do that. You watch. And before you knew it, the rest of that sales team was producing like they had 10 years prior to get this company into the position of dominance that they were in. But they lost their way. But they lost their way because of their leader, not because there was nobody there leading them and helping them. And one of the reasons they wanted me to clean house was they wanted all fresh new employees because they were going to try to sell the company.
Right.
The reality was sales started to take off. And ultimately, I think the owner was not happy with the fact that it made him look bad that I turned around half of the company that he was responsible for. And so one day he came into work and he asked me to come speak to him, and I went to his office. And he had my compensation agreement in front of him. And he literally tore it up. And he said, from this point forward, you're making only your base salary. And I said, but that comp plan was based on improving retention, improving sales results, improving year over year growth. Am I not doing that? Oh, no, you're doing a great job at that. I just am not going to pay you for it anymore. I didn't last but 6 weeks after that. And I found another job. That to me, I was gone. There was nothing I was going to do to change his mind. He would only make my life miserable. And of course, I couldn't tell the employees that.
Yeah.
So then when I told him I was leaving, he said, you can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't do that? You took my compensation away. That's, I was making more in additional compensation than I was in base salary, primarily because that's the way they wanted to put it at risk, and I was succeeding. So when I said I'm leaving, he said, well, you can't leave yet. We have to throw a big party. And he never threw parties. I said, I don't want a party. He said, this is going to be devastating to the company. I said, that's not my problem. You're forcing me to do this. That income puts food on the table for my family. I performed. I put it at risk. You're failing to keep your end of the bargain. I knew if I was to hire a lawyer and fight it and all, it's a privately held company. There's not a lot people can do for you. And I was in management. And I just said, you know what? This is your problem.
Yeah.
He said, well, we're going to throw a party anyway. I said, you go ahead. I won't be there. And I wasn't.
Wow.
But that's a true story.
Wow, that's really interesting. I wonder what your exit meant for the team that you had turned around, plus, I guess, in time, whether things went back to what they were before or whether they kept going in the trajectory you had set it on. I'd be keen to know those things.
Having feedback from a lot of those people who wanted answers as to why I was gone. And I eventually gave some of them feedback of what transpired. And I think they were mortified.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the company nearly went under. They ended up at some point selling the company, but I'm sure they didn't sell it for what they thought they would get for it. People, you don't have a down and go like this, and then a major contributor to that, leaves, and you don't have a crash from it. It may not have happened overnight, but I'm pretty confident within a year or more, it impacted them.
Yeah, because I'm sure that trust that you had built or rebuilt, maybe for some, was probably hinging on you being a part of the picture.
I would venture to guess so, and I don't like to put myself I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal.
No.
I didn't do anything that was different than what I would teach leaders to do. But the reality is, I think there was a spiral that happened. Well, there was a couple of things. I was not the only one, by the way. And he had also hired at the same time I was hired a new COO who was a Wharton graduate. And she was actually let go before he ripped up my comp agreement. And he did a similar action with her, even though she had done a great job of reorganizing the other half of the company that his wife had been running.
Yeah.
So IT and accounting and finance and all of those other things, she dramatically improved. And one day he came in and just said, "You're done."
Wow.
And I saw her walking out in tears, and I called her on her cell phone and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "He just let me go."
Yeah.
I said, You're kidding me. And she's like, "No." I said, "Don't leave. I'm coming downstairs."
Wow.
And we chatted for a while, and I was like, this is not good. And it was a few weeks after that I got the call to go, which I was at that point was kind of, my antennae was already up watching what was going on. But it was, it's pretty interesting. He basically hired us to fix things, and then he wanted to take the credit for it and sell it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad.
It is, but it happens.
It does happen. Yes. Jim, I want to move on to your other pillar of what I think it's your third pillar or fourth, communication.
You mean compassion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Compassion. Let's go with compassion. Sorry, I've got it wrong in my head. I apologize.
That's okay. But I do believe communication and transparency is absolutely important. And before I got to 6, I actually originally had 15 to 18 characteristics.
Okay.
And I had to really work, and communication was on that list.
Okay.
That may be in book number 2, maybe book number 3. I don't know. But it was compassion. The seed is compassion.
Well, tell us more about why you chose to include that in part of your first book.
So I included compassion and empathy because they're similar, but they're also very different. Compassion is being able to show support to someone when there's something going on in their personal or business life that is outside of the realm of what I can fix. Empathy, on the other hand, is putting yourself in the person's shoes and helping them get through it through actions and leadership. So there's a stark difference for me. So when I think of compassion, and both require the same skill set, both require the leader to understand when they sense their employee or employees are disconnected or are having an issue or they're just off for the day. when you see them with their head hanging low or just not motivated, where you need to insert yourself and be able to drill into, how can I help you? You sense that it seems like something's going on. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But if it's work related, I need to understand so I can help fix it or work through it. And as a leader, compassion and empathy are very different and difficult because there's no easy way to learn how to show them. And especially if you don't have integrity, people aren't going to believe it anyway.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, if you don't have that, you can't have the trust, you can't have the compassion, you can't have the empathy. So when you go to the employee and say, hey, I understand there's a concern here, how can we fix it? I often say, and I don't mean any disrespect to any physicians that you may have on your audience, but what we do is not open heart surgery, right? We're not doctors or surgeons in the heat of the battle. Nobody's going to die on the table if we don't make a decision in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so take the time to figure out what's the right way to do things. And the same thing if an employee is struggling with something, whether it's work or home, being able to help guide them or connect them with resources to assist them, or giving them the support that they need to get through that crisis or situation, I think is make or break for a leader.
Yeah.
And it's those things that really create a following. Because when you can relate to somebody on a professional but personal level to help them through situations, they don't forget that.
No.
Even though it's outside of the realm of my responsibility, I think I'm responsible to ensure that you have a safe and productive work environment to be a part of. If there's something impacting that, I need to either apply compassion or empathy to try to help guide the individual or work with the individual to fix it. And I've got stories with both of them. My favorite story on empathy was when I had I had several departments when I worked for a technology company, and one of them was an old green screen computer system that we were rebuilding and replacing with a Windows platform. And so there was this department of 25 people, and I had to tell them they were losing their job over the next 3 years. And I really, really struggled with what I was going to say to them. And after a while, I actually talked to my mentor and said, I need help, I need ideas. And he was like, I think you got this. He said, you need to think through it some more. And I was like, well, you're not helping me. He says, no, you want me to give you the answer. I want you to think through it. And he was right. And it was really worthwhile. So what happened was I knew that replacement technology would take anywhere from 8 months to 18 months to replace.
Okay.
So I needed a team of people to be on board from the point we were today through, let's say, 3 years, till we convert everybody to the Windows platform. But during that time, as we converted customers, we wouldn't need all the staff that we had. So after I wrestled with that, and I said, if I was in their shoes, what would I want from my manager? My only goal in this was to ensure that I had enough staff to support the existing clients until we pulled the plug totally. I made them 3 promises. Promise number 1, they would have as much notice as physically possible as to when someone would terminate. So if someone was going to convert to the Windows platform, we would know because they'd have to sign an agreement and they'd have to start implementation. We would know it.
Yeah.
If they were looking at another company to try to, go somewhere else, they'd still notify us, but they have to give us lead time so that we could be prepared to wind them down. And I wasn't going to hide that from the employees. So they would have anywhere from 6 to potentially 12 or more months of notice before their job went away.
Yeah.
The second thing I promised them was for those people that wanted to learn the new technology so that as customers converted, they could go over to that part of the organization, I would make available the training during the workday, not after work, to give them the knowledge and education to be successful in that new role. For some of them, it would be programming code in a different language. And some people just don't have the capacity or want to do that if they've used a particular computer language for their entire professional career. So I respected that. So I said, for those of you who want to make that transition, I'll provide the education. The third promise I made was, whether you want to stay with the company or not, I will personally help you find your next job in the company or outside of the company, and I will help you prepare for the interview and help you decide whether it's the best opportunity for you and for your family, both financially and professionally. I made those three promises.
Wow.
My goal was to not have anyone leave before it was time for them to leave, and I was successful. However, something else happened. About a year and a half into this, I got a call from HR, and they asked if they could come and see me. And they came and they sat down, and I said, what can I do for you? And they said, we want to talk to you about the team you have out in Oakland, California. I said, okay, that happened to be this team. And they said, well, we want to talk about the employee satisfaction survey. I said, how bad is it? And they looked at me and they said, well, actually, it's not. Turns out that department is the happiest group of employees we have in the whole organization. The organization had over 20,000 people. I said, you're kidding me. And they said, no. And they said, what are you doing? And so when I went back and thought about it, I promised them lead time before their job would go away. I took the pressure off their back.
Yeah.
There was going to be no surprise. So they would know, and I created a pathway for them to never go without a paycheck by either educating them or helping them get another role in or outside of the company.
Yeah.
And the reality was they didn't have to worry about anything because I had their back. And I never expected that to come out in a satisfaction survey.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. You made it a no-brainer for them. And in doing that, they were able to give above and beyond because they knew that they were safe. No matter which way they go, they had that support.
And it was actually that team that whenever a client escalated something to me and I called them and I said, I need some help in this arena. We need to figure out how to solve this problem. There was always people who said, I'm on it. I never had to ask for somebody to volunteer. I just would say, here's the issue. I need some help. And I would have offers from everybody. And I think that shows when people are really following that leader and are part of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, I am conscious of time. I know that you probably need to get going. But before you do, I'd love for you to pick one of the other pillars. I know we haven't got time to go through all of them, but one that that is still remaining that you think would be really good for our listeners to hear. I'd love for you to talk about that.
So the one we haven't touched on that I think people question me about the most
is
why is humor a pillar?
I love it.
And so I want to make sure I define that. So I'm not talking about the leader being a stand-up comedian at the water cooler, reciting every joke they heard on the way in on the morning show on the radio.
Yeah.
I mean using humor strategically in certain situations. So kicking off a meeting to get people's attention. Or using humor to refocus a discussion in a meeting that's getting off track. Or at a time of conflict with employees to try to ease the tension in the room. And your humor has to not only be appropriate, it can't be offensive, it can't be attacking, and it's very, very difficult to master. Because today, people are so easily offended. So most of the time, it's self-deprecating humor about something stupid I did the day before or the week before, just to get them to realize I'm human.
Yeah.
But I think humor is a powerful, powerful management tool or leadership tool that if people use it selectively, appropriately, and wisely, actually will bring people closer together.
I really like that. And I see what you're saying too, like the offensive humor, the inappropriate humor, all of that can be quite a turnoff for people. And if you want to bring them alongside, you need to be able to going back to what you were saying before, build that trust. And a lot of that comes from saying like, look, I'm human as well. I make mistakes. I get things wrong.
Correct. And I tell people all the time, I don't have the answer for everything, but I know how we can get the answer, and let's sit down and figure it out. And they know that you're there with them and you have their back, and you're not an unapproachable leader who's not going to get their hands dirty. Yeah. I get my hands dirty.
Yeah. I love this. For someone who loves to laugh, I love that this is one of your pillars. I really, really do. And I think having fun at work is so important, and loving what you do and the team that you work with is so important, in the sense that it helps you perform better. It helps you to align with the company so much better than if you feel like you're just kind of biding your time or just getting through the day because you have to.
I totally agree. I tell people, and I'll say it here, if you're not having fun at what you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. Life
is too short to be stressed out about the fact that I hate my job, I hate my boss, find somebody to talk to help you reconcile how to get a game plan together to change that.
Yeah.
And I do a fair amount of that with people who will reach out to me saying, I don't know what to do, and help them and talk them through that, again, because they know and or trust me to give them feedback and to help them. But life is way too short to not be enjoying and having fun at what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much truth in what you're saying. What about for someone who might enjoy what they do as far as tasks go, but struggle with the leadership? How would you help them?
Oh, that's a ticking bomb. So this was a disappointing thing. I spoke at the University of North Texas in February, and it was to a marketing class of seniors. It was about 90 people in the lecture hall. And we were talking about integrity and why it's so important for a leader. And I asked how many people in the audience felt that they worked for someone who lacked integrity. I was very disappointed in the number of hands that went up. And I said, and I even admitted that. And so I invited those people who had their hand up to stay after my lecture was over, so that I could understand more about that. And most of them were working part-time jobs at either a coffee shop or retail shop or something of the similar. Many of them were family owned. They weren't all corporate structures, although some were. But some of the stories I heard were very concerning, very concerning. And there was one situation I specifically recall where the young lady started to break down and cry, and I told her, you need to get out of that situation. That is a dangerous situation. It is an inappropriate situation. And I fear that, I don't fear that you're going to have harm, but I don't think this is good for you long term. But if you're in a situation where you loved what you do and you love the company, but you just don't like the manager that you're working with, I would, at your next review, say that I would like your support to find another position in the in the organization, or if you're a nurse in the hospital you're working for, or wherever. Again, life is too short to work with people that lack integrity or could potentially cause you harm, physical and or psychological harm.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think sometimes if we stay in those kind of situations, it's easier to, you tolerate them for so long that they just become normal.
The wound gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's not healable. And at that point, it's really affecting everything about you and probably affecting your home life.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely has a knock-on effect.
Correct.
Jim, is there one pillar you would recommend people work on first? So they've got your book, they're looking at all of them. Is there one that you would recommend people work on first, or does it depend on a current challenge they're facing? What would you say?
I would say integrity, because without that, all else doesn't matter, in my personal opinion. And that's because it's so unwavering for me and it's so impactful. If you can't get that down, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
I take the vision of the leader who is always getting rid of their first line of people that report to them and moving them in and out. I call that rotating the chairs on the Titanic. All they're doing is hiding their own inferiorities or failures from their board or their bosses by moving leaders around or in and out and shuffling those chairs.
Yeah.
The Titanic is still going to sink. It's just a matter of time. And you see that happen a lot in corporate America. And it's those organizations that have such high turnover. When you see it, you wonder why they struggle. You can see why they struggle.
Yeah, I love that, because actually not just your opinion, also your experience, right? It comes from experience as well, that conversation you had years ago with Donnie Tate, and that thread it's visible throughout your professional life. And integrity, I think, is so crucial too, because it's the foundation for all the other pillars to build on.
So when I was speaking at that college that I just talked about,
Yeah.
there was a young lady in the second row on the far left on the aisle. And halfway through, she said, I have a question. And I said, go ahead. And she said, if it's that important, why isn't it the base of a statue and not just a pillar? And she really, really made me think. But in my mind, that pillar was always the center pillar holding the most weight of the building. Right. Yeah. And I explained that, and I said, that's what my thought process was, always looking at, like a building in Washington, D.C. with 6 pillars, and that middle one is holding the weight of everything else. The others are supporting cast members, right? And so, and I'm not an architect, but I would believe that center pillar is built to hold more weight than the others, although I don't know. I'm making an assumption. But that was how I came up with the pillar idea. But I was like, the book just got printed. I can't I can't change it to a statue now. Maybe the next book will be a statue. But it is that important that it holds the most weight.
Yes, there's no question. Jim, finally, what's one conversation do you think that our listeners, mostly founders, execs, should have this week if they want to grow as a leader?
I think the conversation they need to have with themselves is, am I operating in a way that I can get people motivated, following, and bought into my vision and what we're doing? Or is there anything that in this conversation we've just had that if they want to attack me on integrity, that you don't need integrity? I mean, people have their opinion. To me, it's non-negotiable because I think it builds so much else.
Yeah.
But there are people who have been successful who lack integrity. You can't take that away from them. But I don't think it produces high-performing, long-term committed teams, is my opinion. Yeah. And having built long-term committed teams, I think integrity is the linchpin to all of that. So I think as a leader, you need to think about those soft skills and whether or not you are showing empathy, you are showing compassion, and you are looking out and have the back of your employees. That's our job. The second job that we have is to bring people along for the ride and train the next generation of leaders. And that's what I hope I'm doing, is helping the next generation of leaders create a roadmap for themselves.
Yeah, fantastic. I think you're absolutely right. I think sometimes as leaders can sometimes be so driven that the soft skills don't matter or there's no room for them, but those things absolutely matter. They may take a bit longer because they require trust, and it's humans you're working with. It's not numbers. But yeah, to your point, I totally agree.
Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much for your honesty and insight today. This really has been more than just a leadership chat. Listening to you, it all came down to the impact of asking that one hard question that Donnie Tate said to you, and asking that every single night before you went to bed. I thought that is just really, really powerful.
It was extremely powerful, and to think that it's really been my guidepost for all these years, and that I have the ability to give that gift to others, so that they can lead a productive and happy life. I've had a great life. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm proud of what I've done. I'm happy about how I've done it, and I would do it all over again.
Fantastic. I love it. Jim, it's been so good to have you on. I had so many other questions and places I wanted to go in our conversation, but we've run out of time. But before we wrap up, where can people connect with you, learn more about Impulse, or grab a copy of your book?
So in terms of Impulse's website is just www.mpulse.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I'm on most all of the socials. But you also can contact me through my website, which is very simply jimcarlough.com. There's no space or dot or line in between Jim and Carlough, so just www.jimcarlough.com. You can buy the book on my website. You can buy the book at Amazon. You can also buy it at Barnes & Noble. And there's a few other online retailers like Google and Roku, and another one I keep forgetting, Lulu, that you can buy it on as well. Yes, so any of those venues, the price is the same with the book anywhere, including if you get it from me. The only difference is if you get it from me, I'm going to sign it first.
Awesome.
So anyway, but that's a quick way to let them know how to find me. But please connect with me. Shoot me an email, do whatever. If you want to chat, chatting is free.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And for those of you listening, you'll find all the links that Jim has just mentioned in the description. And if you've been thinking about using conversations to grow your business, maybe even through a podcast, but don't have the time or headspace for all the moving parts, that's where we come in. So visit podjunction.com or drop me a message on LinkedIn. I would love to help. And finally, from Jim and me, thanks so much for being here and for listening. Until next time, bye for now.